Yo, 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 welcome back to Comic Book Junkies. It's me, Andrew,
Joe?
and today we're going to have a Sandman extravaganza. We've got a little bit of news to recap on the Sandman casting for the Netflix TV show, and then we're hopping into the classic Sandman first volume graphic novel by Neil Gaiman, Sam Kieth. It's an all-time classic. A lot of people really love this book, so we thought, you know what, we're big DC guys, Vertigo guys, we'll give it a try. So, Joe, it looks like they finally announced the casting for the Sandman TV show. They had talked about it being in production for quite some time. Neil Gaiman's been trying to get this done for forever. I know they just came out with like an Audible audio book that had like James McAvoy, Taron Egerton, and all these other like star-studded casts. But it looks like the cast that they're announcing for the Netflix show is not quite as star-studded. There's some dude named Tom Sturridge. He's going to be Dream, Lord of the Dreaming. I'm not really familiar with him, to be quite honest. And then one of the other notable casting I see here is Gwendolyn Christie. She's going to be Lucifer, ruler of hell. So I know that there's that Lucifer TV show on like the CW, which I don't watch because it looks like garbage, but people love that. I guess they tried to say that's like not the same Lucifer now and stuff like this and that, but I guess that's a bigger name, but I'm not familiar with her. I guess Game of Thrones fans are. And then I guess she was Captain Phasma in the new Star Wars trilogy, which was Booty Cheeks. So I mean, not a lot of big names for what I would think would be a big property. Do you have any thoughts on it?
Most of it you just covered. I'm not familiar with any of the casting, unfortunately, but that's not always a bad thing. I'm hoping it's kind of similar to the angle they took on Daredevil when that became like a Netflix exclusive. But you are right, it is long overdue. I know Neil Gaiman's wanted this for a very long time, and a lot of comic book junkies have wanted this for a very long time because this character and Neil Gaiman's take on the character is one of the most critically acclaimed takes in comics. And so it's not a surprise that they're actually getting around to it. It is a surprise that it took this long, but outside of not knowing the cast, I'm also excited to see, who they cast moving forward because they only got a few people locked in, like you said, Lucifer and Dream. But I know his sister Death is a big part of even the first volume. So I'm excited to see that. And then, we'll get into it when we're actually talking about the novel here. But Constantine and the Justice League is also featured in this first volume. So if they were to bring that to the Netflix TV show, that would be pretty exciting.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback off your point, I mean, I kind of made a big point of saying, oh, there's no big names, but I do agree with you. Sometimes it is better when there's some quote unquote no names or, lesser known people. That way, they can give a fresh take on the character. They probably won't get as much blowback from the public or, anything like that. And that, I mean, like, what do we want? Like Matt Damon is Dream? Because when you look at him, you're going to be like, that is clearly Matt Damon. And it's going to take you out of it. It's like when you see Tom Hanks in something, you're like, that's not Sully or that's not whoever, that's fucking Tom Hanks.
If Matt Damon were to play the demon, I would be all about that, though.
Matt Damon, yeah, dude, that'd be sick.
What I hope they don't do is do some kind of stupid Lucifer crossover because of that tie-in, though. That's where they could take it wrong. But otherwise, I think we just need to figure out more information about it before I get a better idea of the direction they're trying to take on the TV series.
Yeah, and just to wrap on that note, I mean, they haven't given an announcement date for, when it's going to air or anything like that, but I know that Jazz and I are both, eagerly awaiting to watch this, especially because of the hype that it's kind of pumped into me after reading this first graphic novel. On that note, let's get into the book.
So the second volume of Sandman, we started with issue 1. It came out in 1989, and writer is Neil Gaiman. He's the same dude that wrote American Gods, for those who are familiar with that book or even that TV series that just came out. It's based on his book, and so he's a pretty well-known writer outside of comics as well. But the story itself starts in 1916 England with a doctor named John Hathaway who shows up to a castle and knocks on the door. The doctor informs him that he just received news of his son dying, and Mr. Burgess assures him that he will no longer have to worry about people dying if he forfeits over this book that he's carrying. So he gives it to Mr. Burgess. He already has an artifact, and with the book acquired, he can now perform some kind of weird ceremony that will capture a deity called Death. And the ceremony takes place, and when the actual ceremony is all said and done, Death doesn't appear, but somebody else does.
Yeah, dude, and the Sandman just comes in, plops on the floor wearing his weird gas mask, mask, and the cult ritual is successful in a sense. I mean, they don't get death, which they want, but they do get a prisoner, and pretty much everyone starts getting fucked up sleep right away too, which sucks ass. I mean, I'd be pretty pissed off like back in like what 1918 when this starts, like some guy gets caught in a little room in some basement somewhere, and then like your sleep gets fucked up. People are like sleepwalking like zombies, or they don't wake up, and it's like, God, that sucks.
Yeah, they call it the sleepy sickness. People think it's because of like the World War that just happened or a virus, but it's really because they've summoned Dream.
But there's like so much that so little goes on for how much goes on, to put it that way, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense, but there's pretty much a lot of like inner monologuing amongst Dream, where he's kind of just like a captive audience. Roderick Burgess and his son, they're kind of plotting. They grow older as time goes on, and they're still trying to get stuff out of Dream. But Dream pretty much just sits there, stares, does not talk, does not eat, does not sleep. And he just pretty much sits there, and that pisses them the fuck off, because they're like, I'm gonna become eternal. I won't have to die. That they think they have something to gain, and that bartering with his freedom, that they'll finally get it and he'll break down, but he never really does.
Who cracks first? I like that it comes down to that, because Mr. Burgess waits so fucking long that he actually dies of old age. And then his son takes over the mantle, and he's just like, well, we waited about 40 years. I mean, how much longer can you wait patiently without eating, right? They play the waiting game, and his son's like fucking 80 or 90, and he's still not gonna crack.
Dude, I know. He hit him with like that long-term Gandhi, and they just he's like he's hunger striking for 70 plus years, and he's just like, fuck you guys, just staring at him through the fishbowl he's sitting in. And you know what? I respect the hell out of that dude. He's so pissed off, but it's like, I'd get bored as fuck.
Right? And he's like, in exchange for power, immortality, and the promise that you will not seek revenge, I'll let you go. And Dream finally says his first word in like 70 years, and it's no.
Dude, I respect that. He knows what he's doing. But he finally, as you just mentioned, like he outwaits Roderick Burgess dying. He gets his son to pretty much be on his deathbed damn near. And then he finally like tips his hand when they're wheeling. I believe it's Alex. When they wheel him away, one of the oafs that moved him accidentally scuffed the circle with the wheelchair wheel, which is just enough for Sandman to escape. Like if he has the perfect opportunity, which he does, patiently waiting. He kind of plays dead. He just like slumps over, and everyone's like, oh shit, is he dead? And they're like, we've never seen him do anything. And they're shitting their pants because they've never seen this guy move. They open the cage. They go to check on him. He blows the sand in their face and just gets the fuck out. Dips into the dream world, and this is where a whole ass mood happens. He's naked, grabs a bucket of KFC from Colonel Sanders, and he just starts munching that shit. And I was like, that's a whole vibe, dude.
That'd be the first thing I would do if I got my freedom back.
And yeah, but it's like he's ready to gather his stuff, but he comes back because he wants to roast the fuck out of Alex, which is hilarious because he comes to him in like a dream. Alex is known for not really dreaming that or like sleeping that well, but he comes to him in a dream. Alex turns into his younger self in this dream, and he has a conversation with Morpheus or Dream, and he pretty much tells him, he's like, yeah, I want revenge, and he damns him with eternal waking, which is basically like a never-ending nightmare. So it's like when you're sleeping and you think you pop up and you're awake, but really you're still in the dream. And he pretty much damned him to like an eternity of that until he fucking kicks the bucket, which was really badass because that's like some like next level shit. Like he really hates this dude's guts.
That's worse than dying, an eternity of nightmares.
Yeah, dude, especially when he's looking at his buddy Paul, and Paul's face is like melting in on itself, and then he's like wakes up again. He's like, oh shit, Paul, you're all right. But then like the nurse is in there and her head rolls off, and like no matter what, he's just like grumbling in his sleep, and like everybody that barely gives a shit about him is like trying to wake him up, but it just ain't happening.
Pretty strong first issue overall. I think this volume's compressed of a lot of different issues, and now that he's actually free and nothing's tying him to that castle and he can finally escape after 70 years, he goes back to the dream world where he's got like his own kind of kingdom there, but we find out that it's been like crumbling and like slowly things are disappearing and vanishing and breaking because he hasn't been there for so long. Upon going to the dream world, he's actually knocked out, and that gargoyle finds him.
Yeah, Gregory
the gargoyle. Yeah, and he brings him to those two twin brothers who have a place in the dream world.
Cain and Abel.
Yep. So 2 characters that have already been casted for the Netflix series. They're kind of weird. 2 brothers. One's older than the other and constantly pissed off at the younger brother and kills him pretty regularly, but won't die.
It's on that Bible shit. I like that also too, that it's just a little like Easter egg in a way, because I mean the beginning of this series, like the first like 40 something issues were actually under the DC imprint, just the regular mainstream comics imprint, before it jumped over to Vertigo in like the mid 40s. But I like that Cain and Abel actually live in the House of Mystery. I thought that was a cool little touch. And later on in this issue, I like that they also bring up Arkham Asylum being somewhere that they end up visiting. But yeah, like you said, everything's kind of starting to decay due to his absence. He finally does get to his castle and it looks like a whole shit show. I mean, he does see Lucian, his librarian, but he mentions to him, he's like, ever since you've been gone, it went slow at first, but then it's really like shit's hit the fan more recently. Like all the books disappeared, all of the help is gone, and pretty much the whole dream world is weak. I mean, it's been 70 years. I mean, shit's not going to be great. He talks to Hecate. I don't know how to pronounce that, to be real.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I can't. I want to know how to
Beats the fuck out of me, dude.
Yeah.
The 3 witches that are one.
Yes. Yeah. And that's kind of cool, right? There's 3 witches, so he gets 3 wishes and only 3 answers. And he basically asks, where are his artifacts that give him power? So I guess to backtrack a little bit here, he put most of his power in 3 different artifacts before he got captured by Mr. Burgess. And we're looking at an amulet, a helmet, and what was it? And a bag of sand, right? He asks each witch where one of these artifacts would be, and they don't give him like the exact answer, but they give him a good direction to follow, so that he can regain his strength.
Yeah, and we find out that at the end of the issue that Constantine has the bag, John Constantine, a demon has the helm, and the Justice League is in possession of the amulet. So, I mean, that's pretty cool too. Like I said, I really like the DC touches in this because I always knew it as more of a Vertigo thing rather than a DC thing. So to see all of the like integration of the Justice League being in the story and Constantine, especially for the look and feel of this book, I find that really cool. Which, by the way, the look and feel, just to get a little bit out of the way now, how did these first few issues, how did the art strike you?
It was well done. I don't think stylistically it was my favorite choice. Everything, including not only the art, but the writing, felt very British to me.
Mate.
Exactly. And so it was kind of hard to get interested at first, but once we kind of get the idea of the background of Sandman and him chasing these artifacts, the story really picks up moving forward. So the art was good, just stylistically, it wasn't my preferred choice. I do like how they do the art for the character Sandman, though, or Dream, rather. I think they did him well, but the rest of it,
I'm almost the opposite. I didn't think it was too British in terms of writing. I actually really love the writing, which I mean is kind of like the strong point of this book. That's what Neil Gaiman's known for, is being a strong author. But Sam Kieth art, I mean, I guess he's an industry legend and whatnot. I'm not trying to disrespect the man, but I can't stand that shit. You know, this is the same guy that created the Max, you know, that purple looking thing with the weird yellow fists and I don't know, dude. It was the 90s and I don't like that shit at all whatsoever. It always aggravates the hell out of me just looking at the art for that. I'll look at any cover of that character or anything and I just get angry irrationally. But yeah, I mean, it was a weird take. It just didn't feel like it matched the tone of the writing for me. Like, this is such honestly, a goofy ass art style. Like when you're looking at Dream, especially, I know you like it. And I mean, I liked it for what it was, but later on, once we get into like the later issues, I feel like the art starts to line up because Sam Kieth left after the first like handful of issues. I was waiting for that to happen because I was like, what's up with this gaunt looking motherfucker?
Well, the first artifact he tries to get is the bag of sand from Constantine. And when he's standing next to Constantine and he's just like, bro, we cannot go out in public with you. You have to start looking normal. And so he like imagines a cloak on himself or like some kind of, what is it? What are those kind of coats that like weird pedophiles wear?
Dusters?
Basically. And
he like a big leather duster?
Yeah. And the art for him wearing that was kind of silly, kind of cool. I didn't mind that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, stuff like that. Like, I think like stylistically or like how he was drawn, like especially like the clothing, the setting and stuff like that, I really liked. I think it's just the actual pencils themselves that aggravate me.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the hell was this guy trying to draw? It looked like that Spy versus Spy comic from like Mad TV when he drew his face. I was like, what the fuck is that?
It did kind of look like that. It also kind of looked like the art that was in Comic Odyssey. Not exactly like it, but similar.
I smell what you're stepping in. But yeah, I mean, it just struck me weird at first because, you expect like elegant writing. Oh, this British author, he's got such taste, such tact. And then they fucking throw this guy doing chicken scratch on the page. I'm like, well, that's not what I expected. Especially when you see like art later in the series, or if you're like us who are like buttheads and kind of read it out of order. We read Sandman Overture when we started collecting, and that was beautifully done. I like the rendition of that. I mean, that's J.H. Williams, though, and whatnot. So that looked a hell of a lot better. But, just a little aside there before we start getting into the next issue. Like you said, he gets in contact with Constantine. I like that when he wakes up for breakfast, he goes and gets a burger and a couple coffees for breakfast. I was like, that's some real flashbacks to me going up north as like a 6-year-old, and I would demand like a hot dog for breakfast. Same vibe. But I thought that thought that little touch was hilarious. Yeah, and
that's what I still eat for breakfast.
Yeah, dude. But I like that. I really actually did like here too, just a small note about how badass Constantine is. I thought it was really good writing for him. He's a sloppy kind of guy. The way he talks about his junkie ex, like in a kind of romantic way, even though he kind of is rooted in reality. Like he sees her for what she is, but he likes that. And then, just his interest in magic, but he seems at least a bit more like responsible in tone and a little bit slightly less of a D-bag than we see him written today. Like
it was a great take on the character. It was one of my favorite things I've read about Constantine.
Exactly. Same here.
And I like the way that Sandman approaches him too. He's just kind of like, hey, I need my bag of sand. Instead of saying hi, he just kind of breaks into the crib and is like, this is what I need, and instead of being like, because of how confrontational it came across, Constantine just went right along with it. Doesn't even know this dude, but he's just like, yeah, I'll help you get your bag of sand. He's just like, you know what? It could be in my storage locker. And this is one of the funniest parts of the whole comic. They get in a car together and they're driving. And I'm just like, how freaking goofy is that? I know a little backstory. I think this is where it may come from. But when Neil Gaiman was writing American Gods, he literally took a tour around like all the different states. He was constantly driving and traveling, and so he often puts that in his stories. And so for them just being in like a taxi cab kind of vehicle, just cruising around together, some dude who looks like he belongs in The Crow and Constantine, it was just it was silly. I liked it. It was funny without cracking a punchline or anything like that.
Yeah, that was badass. And so they find out like it's not at his storage locker or anything like that. So they go and look for his ex-girlfriend.
Who's a junkie.
Yeah, who's a total junkie, just like us. She totally comes in.
Well, they're in the storage locker and he sees a picture of her and he's just like, oh, you know what? She was stealing all kinds of shit from me because she was a junkie. Maybe we should go visit her. And he doesn't know where she lives, but he knows where her dad lives for some reason. And so that's where they take the vehicle to. And when they get to the house, this was my favorite part of the whole volume. It very much reminded me of horror comics at its like finest.
Yeah, absolutely. So they get in the front door. Dream warns Constantine. He's like, this is not for mortals. He's like, it's very dangerous. You should get out of here. And Constantine's like interested by that. He's like, nah, I'll stick around. But he goes out to the car, which I also do like as a little character moment. And he goes and tells Chaz, his taxi driver, he's like, yeah, if anything happens, he's like, get the fuck out of here. Which means, like I said, we see him way more selfish nowadays, at least in what I see him in. And I like that he's like a genuinely good dude in this, regardless of his faults. But to get back into it, Dream warns him that, it's dangerous up in here. They go up the stairs and he's like, watch for the mortal or whatever. And then he's like, what are you talking about? And he like sees a dead guy and he's just like, oh shit. And then he falls into like a bad dream, like a nightmare. He's like falling out of the sky, he's scared as fuck. But Dream comes in, swoops him out and takes him out of the dream. And everything's fine for the moment, but it's dark in there. So Constantine goes to flick a light switch. And there's blood and there's guts and the room's like alive. And
I like how they say it's presumably her dad.
Yeah. And they're like, is it alive? And he's like, yep. And that's what's even grosser to me, that he's just in a living room that's the inside of his ex junkie girlfriend's dad. And it's gross. And he says, I want to throw up my hot dog. And I was like, it's my diet.
That was your hot dog coming up. Yeah, dude. They finally get through this nasty ass hallway and they open the door. And one of the coolest shots of the whole comic, he sees his girlfriend, but her like flesh is falling off her skin and she's completely naked laying in the bed and she's all junked up on that bag of sand. It was so metal.
It was pretty metal. And I like that he finally gets the sand back. I mean, he didn't have to put up much of a fight, and she looks like shit.
Dream just grabs a bag of sand, and he's just like, okay, we can get out of here. But Constantine's still stuck on his ex-girlfriend. He's just like, bro, she looks terrible. Like, we got to do something about it. And he's just like, oh, okay, I'll help you.
Yeah, and he's like, can you save her? And he's like, she's gonna die, like, soon and painfully. And he's like, you can't save her? He's like, no. But then he's like, come on, bro. And he's like, fine, I'll do it. And he's like, so is she okay? And he's like, she died peacefully. And it's just like, he's like, thanks. He's so let down.
Right. But he does do him a solid. He blows that bag of sand on her and she dreams, and finally it's not a nightmare. It's like a good dream, and she's with Constantine again. And so her like last memories of her passing are with Constantine. And even though Constantine doesn't realize what kind of solid that dream did for him, he did the situation justice. So you start to really love the character Dream and Neil Gaiman's take on Constantine.
Absolutely. And now this was one of the other cool issues that I liked, issue 4 here, where Sandman goes to hell and he wants to have a talk with Lucifer. I like that the demon Etrigan pops up. Hell yeah. Squatter bloats up at the front door talking shit to Dream, and Dream like gives him a good smackdown. Then Etrigan comes out of nowhere rhyming about Squatter bloat. He's pretty much saying, get the fuck out of here, I'll take him to Lucifer. And I thought that was cool too. I'd love seeing the demon pop up. And like, I don't think this is what Jack Kirby had in mind when he created the character, but I like that this is how they use him.
Yeah, it was pretty fitting. And he does make a good host to bring him to Lucifer, where he's trying to find his second artifact, which is his helmet.
And I like that Sandman talks to him too. He's like, oh, Etrigan. He's like, you rhyme now? And he talks in that whole limerick the whole time too. I'm like, that's badass. But you know, he finally gets through pretty much all of the circles of hell. You see like the suicide forest, which he makes a note like, oh, this was only a grove when last time I was here. Now it's like a full forest. And I do also like that when he's walking along like the cliffside, that depending on who he's in front of, they see him as a different god or something else, and they'll refer to him as such. So when he has like that brief little interaction with the dude in the cage on the side of the cliff, I think they call him like whatever, dude. I don't know what the fuck it was called, but he sees him completely different than how we're seeing the character. And I thought that that was cool.
I did too. I also liked when they finally reach Lucifer. He's just like, I know my helmet's here. I need it back now. And Lucifer's just like, back in the day, I probably could have done that for you, but I don't have that kind of pull around here anymore. And he's like, why not? He's like, you're fucking Lucifer. You're like the queen of hell or whatever. And he's just like, well, it's got 3 rulers now. And that's when we discover that hell is no longer ran by one individual.
Yeah, dude, it's a triumvirate. He's like, yeah, we got Azazel here and we got Beelzebub now, the Lord of the Flies. So there's just a big ass fucking fly floating around being a dick.
And some weird looking pine cone.
Yeah, dude. And he's like, yo, find me my shit. And they're like, do you know like the demon by name? He's like, bro, you know how many fucking demons there are? No, I don't know him by name. He's like, I just know that one of those fuckers has it. And they're like, okay, so tell us who it is, we'll get it for you. And they
summon every demon in hell.
They're like, so they're all gathered here, pick out which one. And he has to pull out his pocket sand like he's Dale Gribble and just blow it into the wind. It swirls around this weird looking dude, and he's like, give me back my shit.
Like roping cattle.
Yeah, dude. But, it's nothing straightforward in hell, apparently. And he has to challenge this demon to get his helm back. It's like, bro, he's literally the essence of dreams. Before you'd like kiss his ass, now you're challenging him and he might be a hell plaything if he loses to this weird pink guy. It was pretty much just like a weird like beat poet type thing in some like club where they're just like, what are you? What am I? And they just try to one up each other. And Dream's a smart guy. He starts one-upping the weird pink guy. The pink guy starts taking it a different direction because his cattle or his buffalo stomps out the pink guy's snake. But then he says, I'm anthrax, which kills the buffalo. And then he's like, well, I'm the world. And then the pink guy's, I'm the universe. And he's like, I'm hope. And the guy's dumbfounded. He's like, I give. And Satan's pissed off. Well, Lucifer's pissed off. He's like, bro, you suck. Go torture his ass. And they take the loser away to go get his ass beat. Dream gets his helm back, and he's like, you guys did me a solid. I appreciate that. I'll remember this kindly, that you are very respectable people here in hell. And they're like, wait a minute, you don't think you're leaving, do you? And he's like, well, of course I do. And they're like, well, dreams don't have power here. And he's like, well, what power would hell have if those here imprisoned were not able to dream of heaven? And he just walks out with big dick energy. And I thought that was a really good line and a really good way to get himself out of that.
That thing was just dragging on the ground, dude.
Yeah, dude. Full tripod.
Shit's funny. That was one of the better chapters too. I definitely agree with you. The cool thing about it too, he's got 2 out of the 3 artifacts and kind of peacefully leaves, and then it leads into some kind of epilogue where we, like you mentioned earlier, see the Arkham Asylum, and there's a doctor named Destiny who basically looks like a zombie, pretty nasty looking, and one of the officers passes him some kind of eyeball amulet and said his mother passed away and it's a gift for him. So interesting transition into the next chapter.
Yeah, and where it picks up from there is that he says it's time to dip. Mom died. I'm going to start looking for that amulet that we had before. And I like that he's talking to Scarecrow for whatever reason. That's who he decides to, share his thoughts with, which I thought was cool. Being in Arkham, I do love Scarecrow. But Dream goes to see Mr. Miracle like in his dreams, where he's scot-free on Apocalypse, trying to escape from Granny Goodness, which I thought was sweet as hell too, because I love the fourth world stuff, and I was like, well, this doesn't really have a place in here, but it all makes sense at the end. But he also runs to Martian Manhunter, and Martian Manhunter has to help him. He sees him as like a giant flaming like head, as like a fire god, and Martian Manhunter is more than happy to like help him out with whatever he needs, which, like I said, kind of like when he was in hell, how people see him different. Martian Manhunter has like a high respect for like this god, and I like that Dream knows like automatically. He's like, oh, a Martian. He's like, I didn't know there were any of you left. And I like that he like knows all of that, and I think that that's really cool too. And I like that also once that they help him out, Martian Manhunter goes to Mr. Miracle and tells him he's down to share some Oreos, which is hilarious.
It's an ongoing thing in comics that Martian Manhunter loves Oreos, and so I thought it was pretty tasteful that Gaiman makes a reference to it.
Yeah, dude, Oreos rule. I don't blame him. This was something that I like. This is a more like small moments that I liked rather than what's going on in the issue, but I like that Sandman can read dogs' dreams. When I was reading this book out on the couch in the living room, I was telling my girlfriend Jazz about it, and she was asking, she's like, can he read dogs' dreams? And that was like in the first issue, and I'm like, look, I don't know. I'm assuming so. He's Dream. Like, why? I mean, if dogs dream, then yes, he would. But I like that I got the confirmation in this issue. I pulled my headphones off and told her, I was like, yeah, he totally does. This dog's dreaming of being a pirate. And I really liked that. It was goofy. But I like how he traverses the dreams in order to get where he needs to in like the real world as well. And he finally gets into like the JLI's storage unit up in like upstate like Gotham, and he finds his amulet, but it's all fucked up, and it tosses him up, and he's like laying on the floor like he just tossed up, because Dr. Destiny actually while he's on the way up to get the same amulet, he mentions to the woman that he's holding hostage that he made a bunch of imperfections to the gem, and that he's a scientist, and that he manipulated it to where only he can use it now. And Dream had no idea about that, and he gets fucked up.
I like the relationship he builds with the person he holds hostage to. So escaping prison, he puts a gun to this lady, like the first driver he can find, and said, like, we need to go to this storage unit. First, she's scared of him, and then they start having a conversation, and she's like, you know what? This guy might just be misunderstood. She's like, can I get you like a coat or something? He's like, yeah, that'd be great. And she's like, you just look so cold. And so he gets a jacket, and she's like, can I get you any food? And you're like, no, I'm okay. And he explains explains that he is a scientist and what he did to the gem and everything like that. And he reaches the storage unit a little after Sandman. But as he exits the vehicle, he's like, very nice to meet you. She's like, it was nice to meet you too. And he grabs his gun that he's been holding basically to her the whole entire time and blows her brains out anyway. So I was like, whoa.
I know.
Like,
I was
wild.
like, what the fuck? This guy's so polite for being an ass.
Right. Yeah, what a villain.
That's evil. Especially because like he was introduced back in like the like, you know, the goofier like 70s like Justice League, and he was kind of just like a campy, goofy villain. And then they go and turn him into like this like horrible monster. I thought that was pretty dope.
It was pretty dope. And yeah, he sees Sandman on the ground, but doesn't really care that it fucked him up. He was just happy to get his amulet back. So he picks that up, takes it to a diner downtown, gets a cup of coffee, and it starts a 24-hour countdown.
Now here's where we're at, where I get happy. The secondary or the inker, Mike Dringenberg, I can't pronounce his last name properly. I'm really bad with that on this book. He takes over as the penciler after Sam Kieth leaves, as I mentioned earlier. And Jesus Christ, does this book look kind of tonally the same, but there are certain character moments that look way better. So like, especially how Dr. Destiny's drawn, he's got like a little bit more weird hair and he looks a little bit more skull-like, which I do like. And then I do like also how Dream's being interpreted now. The lines look a lot cleaner and he looks like more of a person, I guess. But he's pretty much just loitering at the diner, just being a dick. They said he keeps ordering coffees and watching him cool. He just sits there and he's just pretty much using this diner as like his own plaything almost. And he's trying to infect the world with madness. He wants them to have nightmares, and he even has like the guy on the kids show slit his wrist on the puppet, and I was like, Jesus Christ, it was so fucked up. But it's like this whole issue, I had little notes on it just because it's just, there's so many terrible things that just like happen, and it's
basically just him messing with everybody in the diner because he has his power again now that he's out of prison and has the amulet.
Yeah, it's a good read, but it's just really hard to really unpack that issue just because there's so many little character moments, but they make a lot more sense in the context of the full story when you're reading through it. But I do like that Dream shows up at the end of this issue after pretty much all of the atrocities within the diner that Dr. Destiny has pretty much committed. And I like how in issue 7, he walks up to him and the first thing he says is, "What do you think you're doing?" And I love the way that Morpheus commands the room, and he just cuts all the shit out, and he's just like, "Who the fuck do you think you are? What are you doing?"
That thing's still dragging, dude, from hell.
Yeah, dude. He got his helmet back, and he's fucking on one. I like that he's like, "What do you think you're doing?" He's like, "I got my helmet back. I've got my sand." He's like, "I'm gonna go buck you up in the dream realm." And then, Home Dog follows him in there. They have a little fight across like time and dreams and history and stuff like that. And Dr. Destiny pretty much got the upper hand on him. He's just zapping the shit out of him with the gem, but he roasts Dream so hard that he breaks the gem and actually restores all of his power, which I thought was crazy. I thought he actually was done in, and then I flipped the page and I was like, oh shit, now he's huge. He looks like he's in Joy Division.
Yeah, I think he was thinking crushing the gem would completely help him win in battle, but it just released all the power and energy from it, and of course it goes back to the host. And so that's what happens. Dream doesn't even seem too mad about it. He's just like, I got my powers back. Thank you for everything. Now it's time to return you to the asylum where you belong.
Yeah, and he's pretty much at full power now, walks him back into Arkham, and that's pretty much that. He drops him off, and then we get to issue 8, which is kind of like a whole different kind of end of arc almost, where it starts up, where we meet his older sister, Death. So that's her first appearance, too, for investors out there. She will very likely be in the show. I would put my money on it. And believe it or not, I mean, I wasn't tracking this book in price necessarily before, but I remember seeing it around for, $20-$40, something, reasonable. But these books are well over $100 now raw for both this and Sandman issue 1 if you want that little spec tip.
I gotta be honest with you. After I finished reading this, I went on eBay to see if I can get the first issue for cheap. And there's no more cheap copies, dude. I remember it being a pretty inexpensive book when I started collecting, but I never read the series, so I was just like, I could wait on it. But now that this Netflix shit came out, I mean, copies are going through the roof, both for the first appearance of Death and the first appearance of Dream.
I pray it goes the way of Preacher a little bit, and like, after the first season comes out or something, it goes down a little bit so that we can get in on one, because I would like one, especially after reading this. I'd like to read more of this book actually. But besides that, we're in issue 8, which is actually, I don't know if it was my favorite issue, but I do really like how Death shows up. She was a great character. Dream's pretty much moping around, feeding pigeons. He says he feels unfulfilled, or pretty much that he feels nothing because his like great quest or his task is over. Once he was in prison for that long, like he finally had something to do. He had to restore the dream world. He had to get his shit back. But now he's done all of that for the most part. And now he's kind of, sitting on his hands. He doesn't know where to go from here.
I like that Death is a very optimistic character. And she's just like, stop feeling sorry for yourself. You're being a real big pussy right now. How about you come hang out with me for the day and get your spirits back up? And he's like, I can stop feeding the pigeons and do that.
Yeah, and pretty much from there, I mean, he just tags along with her, kind of like a job shadow. And, first stops an old Jewish guy fiddling around in his apartment, and people all react to it differently. Dream states that like a lot of people don't appreciate his sister's gift of what death is, and that most people, at least mortals, they fear it, and that they're not appreciative the way that they should be. But when they go to this first old Jewish guy, he sees her. She asks, do you know who I am? And he says, I do know who you are. And, he's pretty accepting of it. He's willing. And he kind of looks back on his dead body pretty much. And he's like, wow, I don't look right. I don't look good. And he's like, well, what do I do now? He's like, where do I go from here? She's like, that's what you'd find out. Pretty much they go town or place to place. A baby gets taken. So, I mean, no one is spared from death. And I kind of like the way that they explain death in a way that they're trying to reinforce that, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's that it's something when you go to, when you're done, like you should be like optimistic towards it. You can't fear it. And I really liked that. And, this whole job shadow kind of gives Dream a new perspective because, he has a responsibility. His sister has a responsibility. And no matter what, they have to, stay true to that, and they have to keep doing their role. So, I mean, this whole issue was really cool. It's definitely better to read it than to listen to how I explained it. But
it's a good bridge into the next volume, because it basically just concludes with Dream having purpose again now that he has his artifacts and is not feeling so bad for himself. He's got family, and it kind of gives him some purpose moving forward. So I guess that kind of wraps up the novel. What would be your overview? What would you rate it?
Overview. So I'm going to give a little short recap of what I really think. So writing, excellent. Like the analogies, the symbolism, the just straight up dialogue is all great. I really like how it flows together. Neil Gaiman did an amazing job. Obviously, this is like a revered run. We touched on the art, obviously, a little bit earlier. Sam Kieth, he brings an edge and he brings a certain tone, kind of like, was it Joe Bennett on, Immortal Hulk? It's kind of similar to that. Like it's got like an edge to it. It's got its own tone, and it fits the story. But I think it fits better there than it does here. And I think that Neil Gaiman even said that too. He's like, the first few issues just felt weird. But, once they had their inker take over as the lead penciler, everything kind of made more sense to me too. But overall story, this first volume is amazing. I really do like the art, especially from issue 5 on. So I like all of that. Well, I believe it was issue 6 on, my bad. But yeah, I mean, it was a good book. I'd recommend it, honestly. If you like kind of things that are a little bit more horror-y, not very super heroic, stuff like that, I definitely recommend it. I'm going to give it out of 10, 8.5. I put this actually a little bit higher up on my list. I really like the tone of it. As you alluded to, like maybe it's because it's nothing like The Crow, but I also got some Crow vibes in a way that I think I really resonate with it. That I'm like, yeah, this rules. It's, it's like that like late 80s, 90s like angst. Like it was pretty emo. Like you could have put like The Cure on behind this, and you would have been like,
I fucking love The Cure, by the way.
So it's just like a whole mood like that. So yeah, I'm gonna sit at 8.5. What do you think?
Ooh, tough to say. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. One of the best horror books I've read. I think it's second to Immortal Hulk. I think it's funny that you drew on that too, because that was something I was going to say. Kind of when reading it, the horror vibes reminded me a little bit of Immortal Hulk. It was very nuanced in both writing and art, but I think I like the writing at first, but the art picks up later on in the story. Now, I was impressed that Gaiman not only wrote the series, but created the character, essentially. I mean, there was a 1939 Sandman for the JSA with the
Hell
sleep
yeah.
gun, right?
Wesley Dodds, dude, he rules.
And then Jack Kirby kind of made his own version of Sandman in the 70s. I think that functions solely in the dream world. And Gaiman finally took it over and made a newer version of the character that actually stuck with comic book junkies. And so, obviously, one of the more significant runs in comic books, period. Not only is he famous for American Gods, but he's famous for this run in comic books. Now that I read it, the first appearance of this character is definitely on my 2021 list. Unless it gets too expensive, then I'm going to wait for it to cool down. Even though it wasn't my favorite thing that we reviewed, it was still pretty high up there. So I was pretty pleasantly surprised. So I'm going to rate it a solid 9 out of 10.
Hell yeah, dude. I can agree to that. So we're not far off on this. I'd say it definitely got the CBJ stamp of approval. Get it for yourself. Get it for your girl. Get it for your guy, your mom, your dad. Who cares? Read comics. They're good for you. But with that, that's our show for the week. So you know where to find us. That's on Instagram at CBJ Pod. Definitely hit us up there. That's where we're most active. Ask us a question, slide in our DMs, let us know what's up. Go on Apple Podcasts or wherever you can rate podcasts. Give us a 5-star review if you like us that much, and leave us a review if you can. It'd help us out. It'd help your favorite podcast out. And you can find us on Facebook as well at CBJ Podcast or at Comic Book Junkies.
Hey, last thing, what do you want to review next episode?
Do we want to go Marvel or do we want to keep it DC?
We've read this horror book, and Swamp Thing, the saga of Swamp Thing, might be a good transition. Swamp Thing's kind of leaking into a television series that I hope picks up, and so I think that would be a good transition from here.
Hell yeah. Well, you heard it here first, guys. Saga of the Swamp Thing, the Alan Moore run, when he kind of retools the character, pretty much classic, helped revitalize the character into what he is today. That is next up on the reading list.
Alrighty, guys.
Later, y'all.